All right, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Max Culhane, and today I'm going to be speaking about 9 reasons why you should consider supporting regenerative animal agriculture. And then I'll talk a little bit about why I think Nguni cattle are a very important piece of this puzzle. So you might be wondering why and what is a medical doctor doing standing at a farm field day? Well, I have an interest in holistic health, and I believe that farming, specifically regenerative animal agriculture, is a critical part of human health and societal health. So I'm a general practice registrar, and I have a podcast called Regenerative Health that discusses these similar topics, and I have delved into and interested in how all these different factors overlap and interact to get us closer to optimal health individually and as a society. So a key concept that I always come back to is that human health is not able to be separated from the health of the environment and of animal health. So what I mean by that is that we can't be thought of as an independent or disconnected from the land that grows our food and the animals that we consume. If the animals that we're consuming are sick, if the land that animals are grazing on is sick, then we are going to become sick, and we can't keep thinking about us as separate from this system. And if we consider or look at one of the key reasons why so many people are overweight, metabolically ill and diabetic, the processed food that they consume is so disconnected from this natural cycle, from this natural process. And I believe that is one of the key underlying things that we need to fix if we want to get people healthier and better. So what this means in practice is that we need to be eating our species appropriate diet. We need to be eating animals that are eating their species appropriate diet. And the ecosystem needs to be grazed or used in a way that is in harmony or consistent with the animals and appropriate human management. So what that means is that humans, we need to be eating ruminant meat. And although not the topic of today's talk, it's something that I've spoken at length about both in previous talks and on my podcast with various podcast guests. But it is undeniable and inarguable that eating and consuming ruminant herbivores was an essential part of human diet and human evolution. So the value that we get from consuming an animal that provides us with bioavailable protein, fat-soluble vitamins, water-soluble vitamins, trace minerals, and all these other nutrients can't really be overstated, especially when we're looking back at the anthropological data, the paleoanthropological data. It's quite unequivocal. So we need to be eating ruminant meat, but if our animals are going to be healthy, they need to be eating their species appropriate diet. They have a rumen, that means they need to be eating grass. That means they're not supposed to be eating grains that are contaminated with herbicide or anything else or other products of industrial agriculture. So ruminant herbivores eat grass and we eat ruminant herbivores, and the ecosystem requires ruminant grazing to be managed appropriately. And there was no better example of this in the American West, where when it was colonized, the depth of the soil in certain places was meters deep, and this was a byproduct of intensive grazing and followed by long periods of rest. So the act of having these animals on the land was building the nutrients of that soil. It was building carbon. It was fixing all these essential important nutrients into the soil. So that is what I invite everyone to think about, which is for this cycle to work harmoniously and for the ecosystem to work harmoniously, we need to be everyone needs to be engaging in the most ancestrally appropriate niche, and inevitably that includes, or that involves, as less amount of human intervention from things like synthetic herbicides and pesticides as possible. So what I want to talk to you today about and is give you 9 points that I have come up with that are, in my mind, compelling reasons to source regeneratively raised animal meat, and why consumers might consider this type of food as opposed to grain-fed beef, or opposed to meat raised under confined-fed conditions or any other conditions. And I really think that this might be useful, especially for those of you doing direct-to-consumer or paddock-to-plate operations, to think about your marketing and how you can help to communicate the value of what you are offering to society, communicate that more clearly. So I'm going to talk through 9 points. The first one is animal welfare. The reason why I've put this as number one is because the mainstream narratives that are collectively attacking animal agriculture and meat consumption from various angles, one of the most common ones is this idea that these animals are mistreated. And anyone who has visited Bryant's farm or visited any other regenerative operation will attest to the fact that these cattle are cared for immensely well and incredibly well. What I like to say is that they have one bad day in their whole life, and that is the day that they get processed. But every other day they are happily grazing on lush pasture, moved around regularly, able to express their natural tendencies as cattle, interact with their children, their calves. They all exist in a mob together. So animal welfare is a critical part of this picture, because we need to help to communicate to people that this is a highest form of welfare considered food. And I like to say that I agree with the vegan movement, in that I don't like to consume, and I discourage people from consuming animals that are raised under confined fed operations like pork and chicken, that are, as a result of that environment, necessitated to be injected with or provided with antibiotics, growth promotants, all kinds of other chemical inputs. So animal welfare is key in my mind, and this process of regenerative grazing respects animal welfare, I believe, as one of the highest principles. And these are two photos, one of Clive Biggs of Nandi and Nguni in South Africa with one of his beasts, and Bryant with one of his Brahman cows. So the next point is in environmentalism, and again, I'm emphasizing this as the second point because these are the most common talking points in the mainstream about why we shouldn't be eating red meat, why we shouldn't be eating ruminant animals. And I believe this image and this diagram really encompasses what I believe is this blanket approach to environmental thinking. And what it illustrates is that everyone, or where everyone is having their attention directed to this extremely reductionist measure of, or proxy of environmental health, which is carbon dioxide emissions, which is incidentally a byproduct of human and animal respiration. But that's another whole topic that we won't go into today. But in this, amongst this preoccupation, this myopia, this narrow-minded thinking, it's to the detriment or the ignorance of these other critical environmental impacts and considerations that we need to be thinking about, and that are relevant to our local communities. And these are things like water cycles, like our soil health, like the biodiversity of our pasture and our land, like ecotoxicity and the overuse of herbicides and like glyphosate, like atrazine, that are having real impacts on the ecosystem. So, and obviously human health and all these other more human impacts of environmentalism. So what I believe is that regenerative animal agriculture is the real environmentalism, and it is doing the most important environmental work, because the principles of regenerative agriculture, as it's implemented by Bryant and others, is that it doesn't involve chemical use. It doesn't involve monocropping the land and essentially strip mining the soil, which is what is occurring in these broadacre cropping operations, which is producing the food that is supposedly environmentally friendly, which again, if you've visited one of these farms and you've seen the alternatives, it's so obvious that which one is environmentally considered and which one isn't. And it's the approach that involves the large grain harvester, the massive spray rig, and acres and acres and hectares of monoculture. That is not environmentally considered. That is not environmentally sustainable. That is what we need to be moving away from, and we need to be moving towards regenerative animal agriculture as the real environmentalism. And I like to really, again, invite people to visit one of these farms, visit Eastwell Farms, and really see these happy cattle, grazing in this model. And it becomes a real absurdity to think that is somehow damaging the planet. And I think a lot has gone wrong in the thought process if these natural herbivores eating their natural diet is somehow being thought of as something that needs to be reduced or eliminated. So regenerative animal agriculture is the real environmentalism, and until more people understand that, we're going to get confused. We're going to be eating more products of monocrop agriculture, and we're going to be getting more obesity, diabetes, and metabolic disease. So that is a really important point that I hope people can think about it. And look, I'm not the first person to say this. There's amazing talks by pioneers, especially like Alan Savory, who's done a amazing video on this, that when we turn our view from this abstracted, globalized view to a local view, and we consider the health of our soil, the health of our local area and environment, then this all makes so much more sense. All right, so the third point is meat taste, and it is something that is quite subjective, but everyone that I know who has tasted meat that has been sourced from a regenerative farm believes that is amongst the best meat they've ever had. And I think there's a couple of reasons behind this, and it actually speaks to what Stacey talked about yesterday with this idea of secondary metabolites. But truly the quality or the taste of the meat is reflecting the polyculture of grass that these animals are eating, and the degree of freshness of that grass that these animals are eating, and it translates to an amazing depth of flavor. And farmers like Jake Wolke have made the point about how the industrial food system has, especially with regard to chicken, has selected for blandness and moisture as a kind of an endpoint that they want to create, a product that they want to create. Whereas the beef that is raised regeneratively is the exact opposite. It is uniquely tasty in its own special way, and that is going to reflect the fact that these cows are all eating slightly different diets depending on which farm they are, depending on the location that they're at. But I like to think of it as like cheese, like fine cheeses. Each one is slightly different. Each one is a little bit unique and tasty in its own way. So just like you can have aged cheese, aged wine, I find that the taste of regenerative beef is delicious, especially depending on where you buy it. So why that's important is because so many people are used to eating beef that has been raised, or they might have just bought from Woolworths, where they might have bought from the supermarket, and maybe people are used to a generic flavour. But I don't think that is the norm. And back when animals were all fully grass-fed, then beef had a more beefy flavour, and regenerative farming brings that characteristic flavour back. And that's again something that I prefer, and I really encourage people to try. And if you've never eaten a lot of fully grass-fed beef and you're not used to that flavour, it is something that you can definitely come to enjoy and come to appreciate, particularly. So again, that's my subjective opinion, but I know a lot of you here highly prefer, or would definitely prefer eating fully grass-fed beef for the taste. And that was some beautiful, just some photos of, on the left is what was cooked for us yesterday by the very skillful chef Matt, and that is some Eastwell sirloin, and on the right is some Wolke beef from I think cooked by Anne Wolke. So yes, it's definitely a culinary experience. So the fourth point is meat nutritional quality, and this idea that when the animal has been eating its natural diet, its ancestral diet, a fully grass-fed diet, that the quality of that meat is going to reflect a higher quality. And there's many ways of looking at this, and the most commonly talked about is an increase of the ratio of omega-3 to 6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, and particularly the enrichment of these omega-3s that we get when the animal has been fully grass-fed compared to omega-6 fatty acids, which is going to happen when animals are fed grain in feedlots to finish them in their life. So obviously seafood is going to be the most abundant source of things like DHA and EPA, those omega-3s. But when we're eating fully grass-fed beef, we're also getting more than we would from feedlot beef. The deuterium is something that I spoke yesterday about, and the researcher Dr. Laszlo Boros has written an amazing paper that investigated the ability of that animal of dairy cattle particularly, to concentrate or deplete its products, its milk, its meat of deuterium. So they found that fully grass-fed beef is going to be more lower in deuterium, and that is going to potentially have implications for human health compared to fully grain-fed beef. And look, it's a very complex way of really looking at an obvious point, which is, the cow was not supposed to be eating grain. The cow did not ancestrally eat grain. So the nutrient quality of that meat is simply going to reflect the fact that if it has been eating an inappropriate diet, it's not going to be as high. So there's also been a lot of other work on this topic. I believe Stefan van Gilt is one of the leaders in this, to really make the case of the nutritional superiority of fully grass-fed beef. But I think it is another reason, or it's intimately tied to the nutritional quality. So taste they're both intimately linked. So when we have a piece of meat or a piece of fish or that tastes better, it is our body's way of recognizing and understanding that this has got a higher nutritional density and nutritional quality. So cost. Now, cost is a topic that is one of the most common protestations of people when they're thinking about fully grass-fed beef. And again, like I mentioned yesterday, it is simply a matter of financial priorities. And I believe that people who care about their health, they care about the health of their family, their children, they are going to make a priority to buy fully grass-fed beef. And the beauty of meeting someone like Bryant and getting to know them and having access to them is that you can buy in bulk, and you can buy whole cow, half cow, quarter cow, and fill your freezer with that meat. And the benefits of, and the costing benefits of buying more meat means that it makes this type of diet and this type of food sourcing that much more affordable. So you'll typically get a cost per kilogram for a half carcass or a whole carcass, and obviously the more you buy, the cheaper it gets. But that simply reflects the fact that you're taking the whole product. You're not necessarily just wanting the ribeyes, you're not just wanting the porterhouses, and you get a cheaper rate because you're taking everything. And again, it's a skill that I think has been lost, particularly in this modern age, is to be able to use all those cuts. But it's fun to experiment with recipes, to use the slow cooker, to use the barbecue, to make stews, to basically make use of the whole animal. And the nutritional content of those secondary cuts is not diminished compared to the ribeye and the porterhouse. So it just takes a bit more skill and a little bit more time and effort to learn about that. But it allows you, it unlocks this new cost effectiveness of eating this type of food, this nutritious, high quality food. So again, cost is something that you can play into your favor when you buy in bulk. So transparency and purity. Now, this is a topic that I think is becoming more and more of interest to people who want to know exactly what they are eating. And it's a legitimate concern, because as the industrial food system has taken off and continues to expand under the scientific investigation of food scientists and other form of agricultural scientists, who are essentially finding new ways of influencing or I'm using the word adulterating in a way that means not necessarily intentionally, but to facilitate some form of animal, agricultural, industrial outcome, like reducing disease or whatever else. But all that to say is that things like chemical use, vaccine use, and other forms of intervention that didn't exist for the duration of our human consumption of these animals, that's only going to increase, and it has unknown consequences. And I think this idea of using gene technology on cattle to specifically vaccinate against certain diseases, what are the consequences of consuming meat like that? It's an unknown. So many people are interested in preserving access to meat that they know doesn't have those type of contaminants in it. And look, another aspect to this is the consumption of meat that has been grazed or consumed grain with glyphosate and other kind of herbicides. I mean, I'm not sure to what degree that is being bioaccumulated and then passed down through the meat. So if we don't want to find out, and I do believe that the animal's probably biotransforming a significant degree of these herbicides, but suffice to say, if we prefer not to have any chance of consuming these types of compounds that are toxic to human health, then it makes sense to source your food from a farmer who for a fact hasn't been engaging in or using any kind of agricultural chemical in the raising of their animals. And that is that's very reassuring to a lot of people. And I think if you want complete control over what you're feeding your wife who's pregnant or your infant son, to me it's a no-brainer that we want to be 100% sure that it's the same cow that our great grandparents ate, that we have always eaten, and it's free from these novel compounds that are having known adverse effects on human health, or just generally unknown, and we don't want to be the guinea pigs. So transparency and purity is a key reason to meet your farmer and buy directly off them. Extending that idea is this idea of food security, and particularly during COVID, we learnt, again, maybe in the US more so than here in Australia, that the consequences of a centralized supply chain and processing food supply apparatus is that when there is a bottleneck, like a massive processing center that can get shut down for biosecurity or infection control reasons, then that threatens your access, or can threaten your access to meat and to the food you need to nourish yourself. So you can secure food security by buying a freezer, by filling that freezer with a half cow or a whole cow. And so that is something that's reassuring to a lot of people, to be able to know that they're not at the whims or the vagaries of what is happening perhaps in the economy or in the area at that time, and have a buffer of 3 months, 6 months worth of nutrient dense food that they can rely on. So food security is, again, depending on what happens geopolitically, it is another attractive reason or way or reason to buy fully grass-fed beef in bulk. So economic empowerment, and this is zooming out and really focusing on the human implications and the economic implications of what happens when we focus in on small community production of food. I've used this photo, and it's the White Oak Pastures store, and White Oak Pastures is a fully grass-fed regenerative farming operation run by Will Harris, who is one of the pioneers of regenerative farming in the USA. And this is in a town called Bluffton in Georgia. And he has essentially transformed a local rural town, which had been gutted by this de-agriculturalization, de-industrialization of the USA. Again, that's happened more there than it has here. But the offshoring of many economic, what was previously an economic powerhouses and agricultural powerhouses, they suffered because these towns lost people to the cities, and the towns suffered massively because it was essentially an economic drain from these centers. So what this bringing back regenerative agriculture that uses more human labor, it uses more skilled labor. In Bluffton particularly, but not only that, in other places too, it has acted as a draw card or a economic lifeline to towns, because people have to be employed and people have to live there and work there, and this regenerative farming has acted as an anchor back to the society to attract people into these rural communities and empower them in a way that they might not have been at all before. So, I mean, the economic empowerment message is also happening on an individual scale, and it's also about financially supporting the change that you want to see in the world. And what you can do by buying your meat from Bryant regularly is that you are voting with your dollar for the world that you want to see. And taking it back to that second point about environmentalism, if you want to live in a more sustainable but regenerated world, then there's no good, tapping on your keyboard, while you drink your Starbucks coffee about it. You should go out and spend your money and empower the people who are doing this work themselves, doing the hard yards. So it's all a part of what I believe the direction we need to go to collectively and individually, which is decentralizing this agricultural system and reversing the trend of centralization towards monocropping agriculture that has occurred over the past 50 years. So walking that process back is how we empower these farmers, how we get access to this nutrient-dense food, and collectively move towards a more healthy society. So don't underestimate the power as a consumer and as an individual in potentiating and driving and incentivizing the rollout or the development of regenerative operations. And maybe you buy your meat once a week and then or once a month, and then you buy it once a week, and then your family does that. But if enough people do this, then regenerative farming becomes incredibly attractive, and that allows them to buy more cattle. It allows Brian to regenerate more grass, to expand his operation into surrounding lease blocks, surrounding farms, and that organic demand is really how we change things. So it starts with a drop, but there's reverberations and there's ripples across the whole pool when we empower and make these economic votes with our dollars. So the final point is animal husbandry, and I make this point because often there are special breeds that regenerative farmers are cultivating or stewarding as a part of their operation. So one of the breeds, particularly that I'm interested in and that I'm going to talk about soon, is this Nguni cattle, a form of Sanga African cattle. But in places like the USA, there's bison, and people regeneratively are raising bison. And when you buy the regeneratively raised bison meat, it's again promoting and helping facilitate the preservation of these breeds, which is important for cultural reasons as well as environmental and agricultural reasons. So let me talk about. I'm going to talk about Nguni now, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm so interested and passionate about this breed. And again, it's like, well, why is a doctor choosing to talk about or advocate for one cattle breed over another? And let me explain to you why I believe it's so interesting and so important. So these cattle, this Sanga breed of cattle, are essentially descended from cattle that migrated down from northern Africa, Ethiopia, over a period of 3,000 years. They traversed down through incredibly difficult and harsh environment, and the process of migration with these tribal people, the Zulu people and other tribal people before them, was that it acted as a selection, and it acted to select specific traits in these animals that I believe are incredibly valuable. And they were valuable to the Zulus in Africa, but they're actually also valuable to us as modern day people in Australia and other countries across the world. So the types of trials or selection processes that these cattle had to go through included predation. So imagine the weak or the slow cow got taken out. It got eaten by jackals, lions, or other forms of predator animals. It included ticks and parasites and other forms of diseases, rinderpest, or biological selective pressure that was made sure that only the most robust cattle were able to survive. And it also included temperature and climate, and the fact that in various parts of Africa that it's incredibly dry, and alternatively it's incredibly wet and humid. But all of these required specific, again, adaptations to select for traits that could allow these creatures to survive. So in addition to these natural selective pressures by Mother Nature, there was also human selective pressures. And I say, when I describe this, I talk about the harsh hand of nature, but the gentle hand of the Zulus. And what I mean by that is they were selecting for specific traits. Things like docileness, their ability to exist in their community group, in their camp, without bucking or goring anyone. So they would have been simply eaten any animals that were having a difficult temperament or weren't conducive to this tribal, harmonious tribal life. So those twin pressures of natural selection from Mother Nature and this tribal selection has kind of given us a creature that is incredibly fit for purpose and incredibly suitable as an animal. And the way I think about it is, this is technology, and it is the most advanced technology that we have for both human food, but also for land regeneration. And again, just because it wasn't synthesized in a lab, it's not made of silicon chips and metal, it is the most advanced technology that Mother Nature has come up with for this purpose. So let me explain some of the characteristics of these cattle and why I think they're relevant to Australia and to, again, regenerative farming particularly. Because what I like to do, and I do this in clinical medicine, I do this when I'm thinking about a health problem or solving for disease and preventing disease, is how can we attack this from a first principles point of view and not reason by analogy. And just because it's been done a certain way, then that isn't necessarily why we should continue to do it. And an example, or what I like to say, is that there were no large ruminant herbivores, on the arrival of the colonizers of Australia. There's no reason why we need to be, biased towards Angus or Hereford or any other form of British breed. We really need to be, I believe, looking at what is the most suitable breed for the environment. And when we choose a breed that is most suitable for the environment, we are going to be doing the highest amount or highest degree of animal ethics, because there's nothing more unethical, other than obviously directly harming the animal. There's not a lot more harmful than simply choosing an animal that is unfit for the land in which you're raised, because it's simply it's like putting a child in an environment, not feeding them. If you put a cow that doesn't have tick resistance in an area that's endemic with ticks, then they're going to suffer, and they're not going to suffer. They're going to suffer because they don't have the natural attributes to resist or deal with that environment. So let me talk about. I'll talk about now the attributes of Nguni particularly. So tick resistance is a massive thing, that attribute that they have, and they have this tick resistance because they've developed certain sebum or excretory glands that is toxic to ticks. They've developed specific hair composition that again makes it very difficult for ticks to settle on their skin. They've adapted very movable or ability to move their skin so they can flick off things like ticks. So that makes them very, again, suitable to humid areas or areas with high tick burden. The fertility of these animals is unprecedented, and the ability of Nguni cattle to essentially calf year on year, every year for 17, 18 years, up to in some cases, is unprecedented. The reliability of both that early maturing cow and then having a cow every year means that it's the value that you're potentially getting is enormous. The other implication or the obstetric advantage of these cattle is that they don't get stuck. They don't have obstructed labor. They don't need pulling. And again, it's a byproduct of that environment that they were selected in. And if very quickly any cattle that had obstructed labor would have died along with their offspring. So the need to pull cattle is almost non-existent in Nguni. And I'm told that feature or that attribute is preserved in cattle who are in crossbreds. So even if you're breeding a different bull over an Nguni cow, I'm told that the offspring that cow will maintain a very easy calving. So easy calving, fertility, and consistency of reproduction. When we think about that for the males, again, I talked to Clive Biggs, who's one of the expert breeders in South Africa, and he has incredibly mountainous, rocky terrain, and his bulls, his one bull is servicing 90 females, and he's walking up and down this incredibly steep land over a period of months, and without losing condition is able to service that number of females. So it's truly remarkable when we, I've heard stories of other breeds of the gentleman getting puffed out and kind of walking behind the females after maybe servicing only 20. So that's something to think about, is how prodigiously fertile these animals are. The other points that I think are going to be relevant is the fact that they have a smaller frame size, and what that means is that you can potentially get a large amount of animals in a given area and therefore aid in the land regeneration. The land regeneration is also improved by the fact that you don't have to drench them, or you don't have to use chemical, because their dung that they use, that they're going to deposit on the land, if that's free from chemical, then its ability to aid in this land regeneration and building of this soil microbes is going to be improved. So I think that's a little appreciated point, which is, if the least amount of chemical that you can use, which is afforded by the animal's inherent characteristics, is actually going to accelerate your grass growing ability as a farmer and accelerate the goals of regenerative grazing, which is to grow grass and to build soil carbon. So that is another perspective on the attributes of the creature as again, it's a tool. It's a tool of land regeneration. I'm also told that in terms of the return, in terms of the amount of beef per hectare, you can't beat Nguni, and that is a function of their feed efficiency. So how much feed that they're consuming per body weight is amazing, so that they're not maintaining, or they're not consuming a lot of food to maintain a whole bunch of tissue. That again means that you can potentially make more money for for less amount of animals. The other point in terms of the benefits of the Nguni specifically are that they have, and maybe depending on your perspective, it is either a disadvantage or an advantage, is things like their hide color. So the hide color is a product of their tribal breeding, and it became desirable from a tribal point of view to have a wide range of colors. But what it essentially means is that they are unique, and whereas all black cattle you might have to brand, or you can't identify them. In Africa, it's a natural defense against theft, because each one of these coats is completely unique, and it's very, very difficult to steal one and try and tell someone that it's not their cow, because they're so unique. What that means is that as you guys as farmers, you've got a couple of choices about how to benefit from Nguni in your herds. And again, this is not an area of specialty, but just from talking to different farmers, people have found benefit from adding an Nguni bull or Nguni genetics into their herd and simply benefiting from those traits. But others have maintained a full-blooded Nguni backbone of their herd, and then crossed animals with a more like an Angus or other kind of British breed, and then sold those terminal sires into the commodity market. But doing things like paddock to plate, to me, in a regenerative way, seems to be the most ideal to benefit from this Nguni, because talking to customers, and that if they know, they understand the values, then they're going to pay that, and they don't mind that these traits are about these unique traits. And it gets to maybe the final point, which is the meat quality. And fully grass-fed Nguni tastes amazing. It doesn't taste worse, it tastes better. And that is something that is a common misconception, I think. So I've tasted Nguni from up here at Eastwell, and then down in Albury, and it's an amazingly tasty meat. So fully grass feeding it and hanging the carcass is always going to help, no matter what breed you're raising. But I really think that the Nguni does have a unique flavour. So I hope that gives you an idea about the different reasons why you might consider this breed. And again, let's put biases or reasoning by analogy aside, and if we purely look at this from a first principles point of view, I think it makes sense. It makes sense from an economic point of view, from an animal welfare point of view, from a sovereignty point of view, and being sovereign or independent from reliance on chemical inputs. because you're running the correct fit-for-purpose cattle for your environment. And finally, I really think this is there's a case for Nguni as a genetic endowment. And what I mean by that is, if this truly is this most advanced technology for raising human food and for regenerating the land, then, which I believe it is, that has been honed over thousands of years of natural selection and cultural and Zulu selection, then there is some degree of obligation to preserve these incredible genetics. And that's why I respect the work of Edwin Rouse, who has brought these embryos over from Africa. He's doing amazing work and maintaining the purity of a herd. So all these reasons to love Nguni, and consider adding that to your operation. So if you want to learn more about Nguni, I've done 5 episodes now on the Regenerative Health podcast with Jake Wolke, with conservationist and photographer Ed Schroeder, with Clyde Biggs of Nandi Ngunis, who have featured a couple of those photos before, with Bryant, who was my fifth episode, and that was a great episode and story about Bryant's past and his journey, and with Edwin. So I'd really encourage you to check those episodes out if you're interested in learning more about Nguni and potentially adding Nguni to your herd. And I will also make mention of the Health Summit. So Regenerate is the first one we hosted last year in August in Albury, and we had a Q&A panel with Edwin Rouse, with GT Ferreira, who's another experienced Nguni breeder from Africa, and it provides another good question and answer or information about the breed. I'll let you know that our next event is happening on the 21st of April in Melbourne. So if anyone is in Melbourne or flying to Melbourne, then it would be great to see you there. And we will be, again, covering these pillars of circadian and quantum health, carnivore and ancestral diets, and regenerative farming. So check out the YouTube of my channel and of the Regenerate channel to learn more. So that is all. That's what I've got to say about Nguni. Hopefully it's made you think a little bit about other breeds and maybe why or how we can optimize our operations using something that is a breed that, like Nguni, that is so fit for purpose. So that's my YouTube channel, my podcast links, Instagram and Twitter, and then yes, my email address is here if you want to contact me. So thank you very much.